Moments of inspiration mixed with time to network, IBJ Media Events has you covered. From industry deep dives to awards celebrating Indiana's top leaders, see what's coming up and reserve your seat at ibj.com/RSVP. When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy, focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
Be curious, be humble, and don't be a jerk. I think you can, and I've learned this as a woman, I feel like you can stand up for yourself, you can hold your ground, you can stand in your values, and you don't have to be a jerk about it, because so many of us cross paths so many times after we meet. I mean, I have interns who worked for me at Nuvo who are now CEOs.
Hi, I'm Dave Neff, host of Talent Scout. On this show, we shine a light on Indiana's next generation of leaders who are making a difference in business, community, and civic life. These are real conversations about purpose, mentorship, and building a future that matters. Join me as we invest in leadership that lasts. All right, welcome back to another episode of Talent Scout with Dave Neff. I'm thrilled today to welcome my guest, Sarah Myer. Sarah is the Chief of Staff and Strategy for the Indiana Sports Corp. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
I'm excited to do this. You know, we met briefly, probably close to 10 years ago,
gosh, yeah.
And I feel like it was at the Speakeasy where we met. Rest in peace. I mean, it's in a different iteration now, the co-working space there in Midtown Indianapolis. But you've made some moves. You were at the Symphony then. Now you've been with the Sports Corp for a while. So we'll get into all of that. But, you know, you are originally a transplant. You didn't grow up in Indiana. So as with all my guests, I like to start kind of at the beginning. Tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, and what that experience was like.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Cleveland, suburb of Cleveland called North Ridgeville, home of the Corn Festival.
Okay.
Corn
Festival. All right.
Yeah, exactly. So grew up, I was one of 3 siblings. I have an older brother and younger sister, and the 80s and 90s childhood is just like unmatched.
Yeah.
So if the riding your bike everywhere, we had a pool down the street. So very much into swimming, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure too. So it was a great childhood. We grew up, our parents really encouraged us to try everything. So we were doing swimming, softball, basketball, volleyball, all of the musicals and singing and playing piano. I mean, we really did a lot of things and really studied hard. So it was interesting because my mom was a therapist and my dad was an engineer at NASA. So there was like the empathy side of things and the like perfectionist side of things. And I think both of those were a big influence in my life growing up. But as I got through high school, I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. Was swimming still a little bit, kind of phased out of that and got into coaching our summer league swim team and got really into doing musicals and theater and sang the national anthem at basketball and volleyball games.
Wow.
So really just so funny how some of those things have translated later in life, but it was always
Could you sing the national anthem now before a big event? Oh, wow.
I used to do it for Indians games, and I have done it for a Butler game before.
Have you really? Okay. Well, the 500 Festival.
I don't need to be asked back, Dave.
I mean,
I think I'm retired.
We have a few anthem slots, at the parade and other spots. So I'll keep that in mind. But
it was great. And so when I was about to graduate and, thinking about where to go to school, funny enough, I did want to try something new and different. So I told my guidance counselor that I wanted to major in journalism or music, and I wanted to be at least 4 hours from my parents, which is wild for a senior in high school to say something like that. And he said, well, have you heard of Butler University? And have you heard of Indianapolis? And I said, not really either of them, but we'll give it a try. And so I fell in love with the campus, got a scholarship, and the decision was kind of made for me that, this is where I should be. So that's kind of how that whole evolution happened, but was all like still very much love Cleveland, have family there still, and try to get there a lot. I mean, I'm probably there at least now 8 to 10 times a year.
Well, I know were similar in age. Do you remember hearing about a young LeBron James when you were in high school?
Yes, of course.
We're the same age, class of '03. So I just remember we went to our after we graduated high school. This interview is about you, but I'm going to share this anecdote. We went to Cedar Point, which is like a tradition, right?
America's rock and roller coast.
That's right. And I went to high school here in Indianapolis, but we go over to Cedar Point and we see, I kid you not, this was end of May, early June. We see LeBron with his class at Cedar Point. And so this was 18-year-old LeBron. And he'd been on the cover of Sports Illustrated as like a sophomore. And so he was already a very well-known entity. So I figured growing up in Cleveland, you probably heard about him at St. Vincent, St. Mary's.
Yeah, so, it was wild to hear about this guy that was just so talented. And, I was a Cavs fan at the time. I was a huge Indians fan. I loved baseball, paid so much attention to it. We had a WNBA team at one point, the Cleveland Rockers. So very much into Cleveland sports when I was younger. And to hear about this guy that was coming up, it was pretty awesome.
So this high school counselor, hopefully you've thanked this guy. He kind of changed your life. You haven't left Indy. So you come to Butler. What was that experience like? This was kind of as Butler was getting on the national scene. It was national championship appearance, but the basketball team was starting to make some runs. What did you end up studying, and just what was that experience like at Butler?
Yeah, so I pretty quickly decided to go into journalism with a public relations concentration. Always loved writing and really loved talking about things in a great way. And then I actually had a really big interest in media production. So that was my minor. Thought that I might want to be behind a camera someday. And so when I was, taking my classes, one of my professors said, "Hey, why don't you, do some work for Butler basketball games, for women's and men's, Butler football games." So I was doing camera work for them. And then he pulled me aside one day, and this was 2004, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing this summer?" And I said, "Well, I was going to go back to Cleveland, but what are you thinking?" And he said, "Well, I'm starting to manage all the video work for the Indianapolis Indians. And so do you want to, if you are staying here this summer, I could offer you a job." So I was the rooftop camera girl for pretty much all of the baseball games. Got paid $30 a game.
Wow.
I got fed. So, that's a college person's dream. Of course, we all went out and spent the $30 after we worked, but
This was summer after what year?
It was summer of 2004.
Okay.
So it was that's a dream college job. And I got to meet a ton of people at the Indians organization. And honestly, it exposed me to downtown and kind of what was possible then. So after that, I was looking around at other, what else can I do in sports? And obviously there's a big scene here. So I think it really opened my eyes to, wait, there's a lot of other stuff to do here. And I actually volunteered for the 2004 World Swimming Championships.
FINA. I did too as an undergrad.
Oh my God.
Came down, yeah.
Man,
so we were just missing each other probably back then.
I think so, right? Yeah. At the then Conseco Fieldhouse. So, which was wild because if you think about it, and Scott Davison at One America Financial was the co-chair for the LOC then. And then I worked on the swim trials 20 years later with him at Lucas Oil Stadium. So it's just kind of the way that it all evolved was wild. And then did an internship with the Pacers and did group sales. And I think, when we talk about internships now and internships then, so different because, and you can obviously level with this too, we didn't get paid. Yeah. We were expected to be at every game while going to school. And then I also was, paying for a lot of things too. So I had a part-time job in addition to that. So I think that internship really taught me about work ethic and what it would truly be like working in sports. These things are expected. I think we worked the day before Thanksgiving, they brought in a Thanksgiving dinner, but it was really an eye-opener to not only to downtown and the sports scene and what was happening in Indianapolis, but truly to what the grind meant.
Yeah, we just missed each other because what year did you intern with the Pacers?
So that would have been the fall of 2004, I think. Okay. Yeah.
I came along in spring of 2007. So fall of 2004, were you there during the brawl?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, November of 2004. I remember watching that at my dorm at Ball State and just being like, what just happened? So you were interning when that all happened.
Let me tell you too, the temperature in the office too, because you had people you had season ticket holders calling in and complaining and talking about all this stuff. So it was tough.
Yeah.
It was really tough. And I gave a lot of credit to everyone that was working there at the time because, they had to deal with all of that. And I mean, a lot of business was done over the phone. So you're constantly taking these phone calls and really trying to make things right. But yeah,
wow.
it was wild.
I didn't realize that timing. But we were still cleaning, picking up the mess a couple years later because Reggie had retired. And when I started, it was right before the 08-09 crisis. And Colts had just won a Super Bowl, which was great for the Colts. But a lot of people that had both sets of season tickets were dropping Pacers. So that's pretty wild. Yeah. Well, so you had some great experiences as an undergrad behind a camera at the Indianapolis Indians, interning with the Pacers. But when you wrapped up at Butler, you didn't go right into a sports organization, right? You went more the journalism route. And talk to us about how you made the decision, I believe, to join Nuvo, right? Nuvo News Weekly. Spent about 5 years there. Just what led you to that opportunity? Yeah.
So my last internship, which turned into a part-time gig, was a promotions manager at WTTS radio station here locally. And so I was doing a lot of promotions and marketing with all of their, a lot of their advertisers and a lot of concerts they were at. So I got to meet a lot of people in the media world and in kind of that, entertainment world. So it was kind of switching over from sports to more to entertainment. And a couple of the people that I had worked at the radio station with had started working at Nuvo and were either doing ad sales or marketing and events. And so there was an opening for a job there. And I mean, it was probably like May 1 and I was about to graduate soon. And so I was like, yeah, let me interview for this job, and ended up getting it. And so I was just an account coordinator. So whenever kids are looking at graduating and trying to find the dream job, I'm like, I was a sales account coordinator at a weekly newspaper. So like dreams don't immediately come true. But I think if you put in the work, it obviously you can move up. So 3 months later, my boss, who was a salesperson, she decided to leave, and I went straight to the editor and I said, hey, I want this job. I think I could do it. And so he gave me that job. And then probably about a year and a half later, I could tell I was way more interested in the marketing and promotion side of things.
Real quick, when you went to the editor, and we're like, and because I think this is a good lesson for young people, like, I want this job. Like, were you kind of nervous to have that conversation?
Oh, for sure.
But then the boss was like, okay, like, it just goes to show, like, you have to self-advocate, right?
Yes.
And I think, closed mouths don't get fed, right? Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, they're going to tell you no or not yet. But like, I remember having similar conversations at the end of each Pacer season, working up the courage to go talk to my boss about, hey, here's what I've done. I'd like to take on more responsibility. But I think that's especially for this audience of, 20 and 30 somethings.
Right.
So that's really cool that you did that and he gave it to you.
Yeah.
Right?
And I've asked for other promotions before and have been told no, but if you have a good manager, they will tell you why.
Yeah.
They'll tell you the why behind it, and then you'll know what you have to work on or what needs to improve for you to get that promotion. So walked in there and asked for it, and then a year and a half later moved onto the marketing and promotion side. And it was so fun to learn about everything that the Indianapolis community offered, because that's really what Nuvo covered. It covered everything from arts, entertainment, sports, and, told people where to go and what to do around the city. So I was discovering all the neighborhoods and all these things that I hadn't really discovered much of while I was at Butler. And it really grew my love for the city. Yeah. I thought that I would be in Cleveland at least. Yeah. I would, try this Nuvo gig out and then, get back to my family and be in Cleveland. But I just fell in love. There's so much to do here. And it was just wild to go on that journey. And then really it started to open up my volunteer journey. I think what Nuvo really taught me was you got to find the things to care about and you got to invest your time in those things. And so I was volunteering for, all kinds of nonprofits, including the Symphony. And that's kind of how I got my job there.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because you spent 8 years working for Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. So rose to VP of marketing. Just how did that role shape and impact your journey? I love Yuletide, got to say, Yuletide's like becoming a staple for my family. It's such a great Christmas, just holiday tradition. But there's a lot more that ISO does.
Yeah.
And, I'm careful, but I feel like I continually invoke his name. But Jim Morris was somebody that, you probably interacted. I know you did in all of your roles, but he would always tout that we are the, smallest city in America to have a full-time symphony orchestra, I believe. So, just like what that means, because I think some people don't understand how big of a deal it is to have a full-time symphony in Indianapolis.
Yeah, totally. I think probably now we're one of 16 or 17 out of the country. Like that's pretty huge. And when I was contemplating going for the job, I think it was the challenge of marketing so many different kinds of music, because some people can have a kind of misconception of what a symphony performs, and it is classical, pops, Yuletide, Symphony on the Prairie. They have they called it the Happy Hour series when I had started there, but they do mashups of very present day music and classical. And it's pretty awesome, all of the genres that they cover. So I thought this could be a really good challenge for me on the marketing side. Now, I did not anticipate. So this is a funny story, Dave. So this was the week of Super Bowl 2012.
Okay.
I was at a party at Sun King. So Sun King Brewery had just opened a couple of years before that. It was so wild to say
and
that.
Early in the craft beer.
Early in the craft beer. Yeah. So I was at this party and I get a call from one of my coworkers at the Symphony, and she said, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing, but you probably should go home because tomorrow is going to be a rough day." And the next day they had announced that they let go of the CEO. They were completely overhauling the executive team because they were in a financial crisis. They were drawing 12% out of their endowment, and they had to make some changes. And so I was 27 years old at the time. I remember being brought in to the interim CEO's office, and she said, "Hey, I think we need you to run the marketing department, and we need you to come to an all-day board retreat this Saturday." So we go to this board retreat, and so it's the board and then the executive staff, which I'm now on as a 27-year-old. And they say, "Okay, we're going to do an exercise where, we have to talk about the finances of the symphony and what we can do to cut back on expenses." So they put, Post-its around the room. And of course, number one and number two was cut musician pay and cut staff. And I was like, what did I get myself into? So it was just a huge learning in nonprofit management and managing budgets and what best to do and what's not best to do. And luckily, we had really great board leadership and our interim CEO at the time was wonderful. And so we were able to raise the money that we needed to get back on track. They hired a phenomenal CEO. Gary Gensling was his name at the time. And really, again, crisis communications, that was a huge lesson there. We ended up having to cancel concerts because they were still going through the agreement with the musicians. So it was, and then, just managing people. I was 27 at the time, but I had 22, 23-year-olds working for me who were scared. Do I have a job? What's going to happen? So it was a huge, huge learning opportunity for me. And I think, when things did happen in COVID, I kind of looked back at that time and I had so been trained in kind of this crisis management that I actually felt pretty okay and comfortable with okay, how do we develop a plan for those things? So I'm really grateful for the experience. Honestly, after we came out of that, one of the greatest times, that was family there, because it is it's very similar to sports. You are working a ton of concerts. You are in it with a team, your whole team is working on it. Everyone is counting on you to meet a ticket sales goal, meet a sponsorship goal, do all of those things, and you're doing it together. So I think that kind of camaraderie and the grind, it's yet another sector where it is a grind to work. So,
and I think you bring up a good point. The hard years, what you just described, are the years professionally or personally where I think you grow the most, right? And it can feel like a wilderness sort of for most of us would prefer to have a bad day versus a bad set of months or even a full year. But I reflect back, and the wins everybody loves, when it feels like you're winning and you have all this momentum. but it's honestly easier to forget those versus like, man, you think back, you probably point out, I know I can count out like specific years where I was like, man, that was a hard year, but like I grew and it shaped me into who I am today. And while I wouldn't want to relive it, like I'm grateful for the experience, right? Because I think about the 4 years at the Pacers, like it was like I didn't know any better. I was right out of school and I'm like, I'm working for an NBA team.
Yeah.
But the first 3 years were a slugfest and we were dead last in the NBA in attendance and we had to, freeze salaries. Now it didn't impact me because I wasn't making enough money. But at the same time, you're like, man, you look at like the Cavs at the time and in sports, right? It's easy. Whoever's winning or has a superstar, they're the smartest front office, right? But you really had to like grind it out and just stay super, disciplined, persevering, and things started to turn. My last year there is when we finally made the playoffs. I think it was Paul George's rookie year, but that I do remember that era at the Symphony. Now, during your 8 years, did you ever live through? I feel like remember hearing about several times where the musicians go on strike, right? Or they want to rework sort of their collective bargain. Did you have to live through any of that?
It was just that one time, really, when that was like the 2012 summer fall. So, which again, I mean, when you are there and you learn about how much these musicians do and how much they have to rehearse and how competitive it is for their craft. I mean, I just told you like 16 or 17 full-time orchestras in the country. So I think it was hard because we were friends with musicians and we wanted them to succeed and be compensated for what they were doing. But also we were looking at, what we were up against as far as selling tickets and fundraising and everything. So it was, like I said, lots of lessons learned.
Yeah. Well, from there, you moved about now 7 or so years ago over to the Indiana Sports Corp, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
What was the bridge from ISO to ISC?
Yeah. So it was around 2017. I was really thinking about, I just had this gut feeling, I want to do something bigger for Indy. I want to do something bigger that gives back to the community. And I had applied for a few jobs and did not get them. I always give I give a little grief to Leonard Hoops and Chris Gall because I got turned down for 2 jobs at Visit Indy in my 20s. Don't worry, I always I give them grief about it, but
rejection is protection. That's what I'm always told.
And it's always so funny when you think about like what would have happened or what your trajectory would have been. But I really wanted to figure out how I could have more impact. And funny enough, I had just applied for the SKL, the Stanley K. Lacey Leadership Series with Leadership Indianapolis. And I got into that class for 2017, 2018. And it really opened my eyes to obviously everything going on behind the scenes with the city, why it was, where it was at the time. And that was, I think, the catalyst that was like, okay,
Who's your moderator?
Caroline Mays.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Just fantastic. And then my teammate now, Melissa Thompson, she was just about to get a job at the Sports Corp. I remember her being on the phone with Ryan Vaughn, like talking about like the start date and everything. And so it was exciting to see that journey for her. And then about a year later, after I graduated from the class, maybe even like 6 or 8 months after, I got a call from her and she said, hey, they're about to open this director of marketing position. I think you should go for it. And so, I sat down with her and said, okay, tell me the truth. Like, what do you think? And she said, it's a great place to work. You really need to give it a try. So I interviewed and I remembered because, I had PTSD from my symphony days. I sat down with Ryan Vaughn and I said, okay, it's like my only question is, how are your finances?
Yeah. Good question to ask.
And he said, he was like, if I made 100 bad decisions, we would still be in the black. He was like, I wouldn't have a job, but we would still. And so I was laughing about that. But the thing I really loved,
what was that initial role that you took with
the director of marketing? Okay. So, and this is again another lesson. Like that was actually a step down for me because I was a VP of marketing at the Symphony and really in charge of a ton. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to change, and I knew I was like, if I can just get in there, I can show them what I can do. Yeah. And like, let's not think about where it's going to start. Let's think about what the journey will be. And I loved when I talked to Ryan because I was very forward. I said, look, I haven't worked in sports since I was in college. And does that make you nervous at all? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And he said, well, we're not a sports organization. We're a community organization. We just have our impact through sports.
Yeah.
And I was like, done. Like, I want to work here.
Yeah.
So April 2019 is when I started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ryan Vaughn, former president of Indiana Sports Corp.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to come back to something that, speaking of just hard years, I know this is deeply personal, but we had talked about this before the show. But you had a very tragic sort of experience in 2020 where you had to plan your ex-husband's funeral.
Yeah.
What did that season of life teach you? Because this is like COVID, this happens, You're at the sports core. Just, I know what I so appreciate about you, Sarah, is just your vulnerability, like you're real.
Thank you.
Just talk to us about that, because I know that was a difficult chapter.
Yeah, it's interesting because so many people know me, in this kind of like second half of life. And I think the first half, I was married before and got divorced in 2016 and then got the call in January of 2020 that my ex-husband had passed away. And what I'm so grateful for is that we actually were talking at the time, and we had seen each other a couple months before and had just the most wonderful conversation, had told each other we were sorry, that we loved each other. I mean, we definitely... I know a lot of people don't get the chance to do those things when a sudden death happens, but I was very grateful for that. But yeah, his mom called me pretty much right after he passed, and she said, we want to do this in Indianapolis, and I think if you're up for it, we would love for you to help plan it. And so, handling that grief and then planning that. So it was the last weekend of February 2020, and we actually had it at the Speakeasy, which is wild, near Broad Ripple. And to be around, when you go through divorce, there's a lot of things and a lot of stories that swirl around, and a lot of shame in that, and a lot of failure. And I had really gone through therapy and a lot of work to get to a good place. So then to kind of be thrust back into those feelings, I think the celebration of life was actually very healing for me, because it was a lot of people who I hadn't seen in a while, but we were all coming together for this man that we loved. And then 2 weeks later, not even 2 weeks later, the world falls apart. And you know me, Dave, like I love people. And when you're grieving like that, and then you're grieving everything you were planning that was canceled. And I get a lot of fulfillment out of my work. And I really try to tell people, like, really try to find something that you get fulfillment out of. And I really, really got fulfillment out of planning these events and going into Sports Corp and working with my team. And so to have all of those things taken away, it was really dark. It was a really, real low point, because I was thinking, well, okay, I have all this loss. I don't know if I'm going to have a job. I don't know if events are going to come back. I don't have fulfillment right now. So what does that mean for me? And it's wild because, that was all happening in March. We're closing down. We're, socially distancing. And then in July, the RFP came out for bidding on the 2024 swim trials. And so there was kind of this hope around, okay, like, let's dream about what events could look like in 2024. Please, God, let events happen by 2024. Because at that point, the Olympics had been canceled. And so, there was still cancellations happening for all these things. But we were like, okay, like, let's this is going to bring some hope. Let's start like thinking about this bid. And then in November, we got the call to host the entire March Madness tournament. And I remember, just calling my family and saying, I am going to give everything to this. Everything I have, I'm going to give to this. Because not only do I feel like this could really help my career and help show what I can do for sport, but this could help bring back the community. And to go back to, you mentioned Jim Morris, like, see every opportunity in its greatest context. I think, we didn't just see that as a challenge from the NCAA to host an entire tournament. We saw that as an opportunity to bring back the city.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us here on Talent Scout. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, so stay tuned. Most organizations hit a point where growth stalls. The message blends in, the site stops converting, pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, they clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com. So while 2020 was hard for everybody, you had I appreciate you sharing just the vulnerability of that and being honest about your story. And it is pretty special that you were able to have that conversation and then have some closure when to be tapped by, his mother to plan the celebration of life. And then the way 2020 ended with sort of this, hope of, which we'll get into that here in a minute. But talk to us before we get into swim trials from 2024. I'd love to talk about the 2021 March Madness basketball tournament because, yes, it was technically year 2 of COVID. It had been canceled in 2020. 2021, they're like, we're going to do it, but we want to do it in one, kind of community or one state. And so Indiana, as a state, ends up getting to host all 67 games, right? And had the Final Four at Lucas Oil. I remember there was like cardboard cutouts of fans, Jalen Suggs standing up on the table to tout to a bunch of cardboard cutouts.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I know you had a big role in 2021 and planning and executing just the bubble and the whole, Final Four and the tournament. Really, what did that experience teach you?
Oh my gosh. That experience taught me so much about, what it means again to see the opportunity in its greatest context. I mean, we knew it was going to be hard to plan something that quickly, but I will say when you do have a shorter time frame, it does force you to make decisions quickly too. The NCAA team is just so phenomenally talented. So that was something, I think, like the execution of the games and all the people that were going to help. I mean, IUPUI at the time was a co-host and Horizon League was a co-host. So they were helping out. All the venues were helping out. I mean, like Gamebridge and Lucas, all of the staffs. I mean, everyone was pitching in and really just trying to move everything forward in the way that they could. But we were also seeing this as, okay, any downtown would kill for this. March of 2021, downtowns are still struggling. There's closed stores. Not a lot of people are going down there to do business. So what can we do with this kind of media attention, the amount of fans that are going to be here? And so we really thought about, amplifying the downtown, making it clean, making it safe, really, really pushing the arts and culture through everything that we were doing. So we, through a grant from Lilly, we were able to create Swish. Yeah. And so we worked with the Arts Council and Gang and the Cultural Trail and all of these people who just stepped up and said, let's do this, let's make it happen. And so, because we were hosting people for 3 weeks in March. Yeah. So,
and games were played at Hinkle, they were played at Mackey, Assembly Hall, right? Yep. I mean, you used several different venues for that.
Several different venues. And so even like I remember like talking about the cleanups and doing the cleanups that were on the routes that the athletes would take. Because it really is, it all comes down to the student athlete experience. Yeah. If that isn't good, then nothing else matters. Yeah. So I think we were really, really keenly focused on that. So even I remember putting yard signs in on the routes that were going towards, from Hinkle to downtown for their hotels. And we had staff that were at the hotels, before the teams got there, timing out the elevators to make sure that, team members wouldn't cross each other because it was just so many protocols that we had to follow and guidelines we had to follow. So it was wild, but I think too, it just says so much about the Indianapolis community and how so many people raised their hands. And I mean, we had people who had full-time jobs who volunteered to go inside the bubble and live in there for a few weeks. So
did you live in the bubble?
I did not. Okay. I pretty much lived in the Arts Garden. So we had we knew we'd have so many media. And so we made that kind of like the media hub for them to come in all day, night, hang out, get their work done, have some coffee. So that was really where I was most of the time. And then, hopping around to games if I could, just stepping in wherever. I mean, you just kind of had to be on call all the time. So
Baylor won that year, right?
Baylor won.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember coming down, I think I brought my two oldest now and my wife, we came down to the Friday practices at Lucas Oil in 21. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then obviously you mentioned the Suggs shot, and that was wild. And it was one of those moments where, it brought back hope for people. It made people feel again like, okay, like things are at least feel a little bit normal.
Yeah.
And I think to bring people that kind of sense of pride and excitement and joy was just such a privilege.
I'd like to maybe take a minute, I think, for folks like us who, have been on this side of LOCs and talk about it like everybody knows what it is. For those that are listening that haven't been a part of a local organizing committee for a Final Four or, swim trials or number of other events that we host, can you kind of just shine a light or enlighten folks as to, because it is a secret sauce, I think, of Indianapolis. I know other communities do it. I don't think they do it quite like we do.
Yeah.
But what is the motivation? Because as I try to explain to people, I'm like, look, listen, and full disclosure, I'm co-chairing stakeholder relations for this 26 men's Final Four.
Yep.
But, the sports core staff, the NCAA staff, I feel like they do a lot of the heavy lifting, but we try to get, there's several hundred people on the men's Final Four LOC in leadership roles. There's 5 main committees. You got the co-chairs, Nate and Judy, and then the 5 main committees, and you got these subcommittees. And some are more active than others, but just like maybe if you could concisely articulate like why we do that and just sort of the benefit it is to the staff that's doing all the heavy, lifting day in and day out.
Yeah. And the LOC structure, actually, I found out a few years ago, history lesson, is that it actually came from Penrod before the Sports Corp ever used it. So it is really, to give you an idea, Sports Corp is at its largest staff right now at 35. And still at 35 full-time people, you cannot pull off events like a Final Four or swim trials to the level that Indianapolis expects for itself. You mentioned how other cities have different LOCs and smaller LOCs. I think because we hold these expectations for ourselves and the experience we want to deliver and the impact we want to deliver, we know that it takes way more than just a full-time staff and a couple of other volunteers. So what I love about LOCs, and like you said, local organizing committees, but we say LOC all the time, is that it is a way for people to get involved at a deeper level in these events. And it can be, people from our corporate community, from other nonprofits, but it is in areas of really everything: marketing, communications, community engagement, transportation, stakeholder relations. And you're right, the NCAA and the ISC staff are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but these LOC members are also, really helping activate a lot of the events outside of the major event, or helping us think of great marketing strategies, or connecting us to people that we don't have a connection to, and telling us like, hey, you should think about doing this, or why don't you take this approach? And I think like the diversity and perspective is so helpful for us. And it does differentiate ourselves from other cities. And you can get involved in LOCs very easily. It's just, reaching out to us, letting us know that you're interested. I will say we really value people who value the time. So I really tell people, if you feel like you have the time to commit, you will have a much better experience, because we notice those people right away and we give them larger responsibilities. So we have a great LOC for the men's Final Four, and we'll start pretty much immediately after this men's Final Four is done building out the LOCs for the 2028 women's Final Four and the 2028 Olympic swimming trials.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, shout out to Allison Millington, Ryan Vaughn's predecessor at Sports Corp. I think I emailed her in 2011 or 12. I was either at the Pacers or Exact Target, and just said, hey, I'd love to be a part of, I think there were some bid funding committees for the next Super Bowl. And so, true to her word, she's like, go meet with Dave Lewis. And I was on the 2018 Super Bowl bid funding committee, just sort of, at the kids' table. But it was Kathy Langham and Tina Burks and Dave Lewis. And obviously we didn't end up winning that game, but we're trying to secure the 25 or 30 million to host the Super Bowl. And so another just raise your hand. Don't be afraid to ask. And I feel like you'll be amazed at, people like Allison that will just kind of open a door, and then you got to kind of run through it. Right.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Well, there's so much good stuff to cover here. I do want to touch on, because I know you were the event director for the 2024 Olympic swim trials, which I actually got to go to one of the days at Lucas Oil. Was amazing to see a massive pool in Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah.
But tell us about that opportunity, because I know from talking to you, it was a game changer for you just professionally, and have no real grasp of the hours that went into planning that. I know it was pretty significant. So just maybe talk to us about that opportunity, and then maybe tee up why we're going after it again for 2028.
Yeah. It was, when I talk about, and to your younger listeners, really, like you just said, if there is an opportunity, take it and also run with it. Like, don't just show up, but like really step up in that role. And so after 2021 and really putting everything I had into March Madness, 2 months later, it must have been Ryan and Patrick Talty at the time. They both asked me if I wanted to lead on the Olympic swimming trials. And, I had obviously been a swimmer. I was really passionate about the event. I worked a ton on the bid. I was so excited for that opportunity. So really, that was, summer of 2021. So that was 3 years in advance, but it was a new event. Yes, they've done Olympic swimming trials before, but not to this magnitude. And to know that the capacity of Lucas Oil was up to 30,000 people for 17 sessions of swimming. So, and it wasn't a basketball or football game. And the wonderful thing about a lot of our other events is they sell themselves. Big Ten football has been selling out for years. Obviously, our focus on Final Four is not selling tickets to the Final Four. It's getting everyone to the fan events. Well, this was going to be different. We were going to have to get everyone to the fan events and to buy tickets to 17 sessions of swimming. So I think it definitely takes great leadership at the top. Scott Davison at One America Financial is a huge swimming advocate. And really, he told swimming in 2019, yes, Indianapolis could put a pool in a football stadium. So he really was a huge advocate for us doing that and going after the trials and doing something so innovative and so new. And so I give him credit for that. And then Karen Surratt, also at One America, was our co-chair. And so to have that leadership and that kind of, investment from not just them as individuals, but on the corporate side as well, and really go out there and say, okay, we have to get the community rallied around this. And it was awesome to see how many swimmers we had that were also, like Doug Bowles reached out and he said, I want to help. And it was funny because I emailed him back and I said, sure, I'll let you know later, like what we might need from you, because, swim trials were in June, Indy 500s in May. Yeah. But he reached back out and he said, no, I'm serious. Put me in a leadership role on this one. I really want to help. So to hear that kind of excitement from people that who are crazy busy like that. Dave Lewis stepped up. So he and Doug were co-chairs for their division. And we just had such great people who raised their hand. And again, I think it's also about you need to meet people where they are. So I was really focused on, I've got to get more involved in meeting the swim community. So got to meet so many people from Zionsville and Carmel and Lawrence and all of these great communities that have been supporting swimming for years, but they were going to help us get people there. Yeah. And it was really, it wasn't just in Indiana. We really did outreach across the country to swim clubs to try to get them excited about it. So it was, when you ask about how much work it was, I kind of knew that it was going to be a pretty big investment of time, but I was pretty much working every day for 2 years on that event because I knew that if we had gotten through the event and it was even one thing that I said, man, I wish I would have put more time into that. Yeah. I wouldn't have been, as fulfilled on the process. And I was like, so I'm just going to put everything I have into this. And so I did. And our team did. We had some incredible team members at Sports Corp that really stepped up in a huge way. And the Eiffel Tower and Georgia Street, Ashley Newbold on the Sports Corp team, that was her baby. Yeah. And so it
going
was
to the international school.
Oh
now,
my
right?
God. Yes, exactly. So it was pretty awesome to just have all of these people just come together yet again for something so special. And then for swimming to be the only sport that can save your life, I think that was another really special part of it because the legacy impact that we were having of teaching 50,000 individuals to be swim or water safe was really meaningful.
Yeah.
It's not just a couple of clinics here and there. This is lifetime impact.
Yeah.
And so I think that was also something that really opened our eyes. And we've continued to really advocate for that swim and water safety even beyond trials.
Wow. And clearly you did a good job because they're coming back in 28, which is not a guarantee, right? They could have been any other city.
Yes.
So we've got a pretty big docket of men's Final Four here in 2026.
Yeah.
We've got Olympic swim trials in 28, women's Final Four that same year, 28, men's Final Four again in 2029. I do need to ask you, there's been a lot of chatter about, will Indy get an NFL draft, right? The NFL is moving it around. And I know there are some efforts afoot. Maybe shed a little bit of insight on that.
It's so funny, Dave, because when people ask me what my dream event is, it's so funny because it's not even a competition. Like, no one competes at the NFL draft.
Yeah.
But again, not only am I passionate about sports, I'm passionate about the city. And I have seen what the draft can do for cities and how it shows off a city to so many fans. And what's so unique about the draft is you're not talking 2 teams. You're not talking 4 teams. You are talking fan bases from every single team. I've been to a couple of the drafts prior, and it is wild to see how all the fan bases show up. And so I'm really wanting that event because it would be such a great showcase of Indianapolis. And we have had some meetings with the NFL. They've been a great partner for a long time through the Combine, now flag football, which will be in Westfield this summer. But we wanted to really tell them Indy is going to look real different in 2030.
Yeah.
And, all of the projects, and I know people complain about the construction, but hey, cranes mean gains. That's what I try to tell people. Cranes mean gains.
Yeah.
So there's so much happening for the future of this downtown and of this city. And that's really the point that we've wanted to get across. And so we've been really saying, Imagine Indy 2030 has been the theme to it, because 2030 would be a great year for us to host. Obviously, you just mentioned the Final Fours we're hosting. We never want to interfere with that. But I think that it would just be a great way to show off everything that's going to be new in the city, a lot of the new builds that we'll have from hotels to traction yards. So we're hoping for that one. So the NFL has to invite you to bid. And so that's what we've been working on is hopefully getting that invitation very soon.
Yeah. Well, and we're planning to drop this episode, I think, going into Final Four week.
Awesome.
Maybe tell us about some of the musical acts. I know you've announced that, but just a quick flyover of when they're happening, who they are, where to go see them.
Yeah. So we've got Zach Brown Band and 21 Pilots and Megan Maroney. And I will say, because there's great openers too, I have gone to other host cities. You're going to have to, they're all free. That's the other thing. I think that because we haven't hosted a full fan men's Final Four since 2015, I don't think people understand sometimes that a lot of these things are either free or low cost. So it's free. It's on American Legion Mall. My advice to everyone is, if you are a major fan of those opening act or of those main acts, get there early.
What days are those?
It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay, all 3 days.
Yep. So, and keep paying attention. M Final Four is the men's Final Four Instagram. So keep paying attention to that, because they'll keep announcing new things to be added to the weekend. I really think people should try to come to Reese's Final Four. That's on Friday at Lucas Oil Stadium. It's open practice for all 4 teams, and it's free and free parking too. So I know sometimes people get worried about parking. It is easier to park downtown than you would think. And once you park, you can walk everywhere. That's the great thing about this city. And then Fan Fest is in the convention center all weekend, Friday through Monday. Yeah. And that is very low cost, and it is worth it. If you have kids, if they are going to love, because there's a lot of free stuff in there too.
Kids love free stuff for sure.
And we'll start announcing too, and the NCAA will start announcing, some of the appearances. There's tons of, celebrities and athletes that come through there. So it's really exciting. And it's just, such a great time to be downtown. And we'll have a lot of local art and music happening throughout the week. Swish is going to be yet again happening, which is so amazing. The Arts Council and so many of our arts organizations have really shown up for that. So it's going to be a great weekend. Really, any day that you come down, you're going to have a full day of entertainment.
Well, fingers crossed for great weather.
Yes. Yes.
Real quick here as we land the plane, you stay very busy outside of all your day job stuff with Sports Corp. You're on the boards of YMCA of Greater Indianapolis, Dance Kaleidoscope, Leadership Indy, Downtown Indy Alliance, and serve on the Dean's Advisory Board for Butler's College of Communication.
Mm-hmm.
How do you choose to, where to invest your time? Because I know you're also passionate about sort of work-life, what I like to call flow, or some people say balance. Because there is probably a perception that you just work all the time, but I know that's not true about you.
Yeah.
So, maybe, there's a lot you're doing in the community outside of Sports Corp, but then also just time for you, right? How do you balance all that?
Yeah, I think it's really checking in with yourself and knowing when you have the time to invest into those other things too. I dropped off of a lot of things right before swim trials because I knew swim trials has got to be my priority. And it's not fair to join a board and then not be present. I'm sure you've been on boards. I've been on boards that the people who aren't great board members, and I never want to be that person. No. So it was really all about, kind of what I wanted to invest in that I was really interested in and loved. So Dance Kaleidoscope, I've loved for years and years. And
Thank you. My daughter's a client. She goes every Monday night.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. And I always knew I wanted to join an arts board at some point. So, joined that this past year. Leadership Indianapolis I give it so much credit for why I'm here and why I'm where I'm at. So giving back to that. But, it's when we talk about work-life integration, it's just so funny, the concept of 9 to 5, because I just don't think it's realistic or like, why do we even talk about it like that? Yeah. We have so many people who are, parents or taking care of parents or having all these things going on in their life. Why can't they work together, and I think so many of us are balancing so many things, and you just have to figure out how to work it out. I'm gonna go have a meeting at 4 with a friend because we got to catch up on stuff, and you know what, we're gonna have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
But me, I'm gonna be up really early tomorrow morning getting stuff done. So it's just like you have to find that kind of balance. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting to use the word balance and say work-life because, life is life and work is a part of life. Yeah. But I think that it's about finding something that you're really passionate about and you feel like you can give the time to. And also just acknowledging that priorities change all the time. Family things can pop up and sometimes work stuff. Really for us, March, work is a priority, that it just has to be. But being really honest with yourself about, when those shift and being honest with your teammates about it too. And I think if we could be more honest and vulnerable about the things that are impacting our lives, and, I think the work would be a lot easier.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I always like to ask all my guests about mentors, and this is a chance to maybe give a person or two some flowers. And I like, we all probably have family members, but maybe for this one, non-family, who are some leaders that really believed in you and sort of changed your paradigm for what's possible?
Yeah, it's funny because we've already mentioned a few of them, but Ryan Vaughn, huge mentor. And I remember it's funny because we're having all these Final Four memories float up as we're about to go into Final Four weekend. But, I go back to RIFRA. I remember watching TV for the 2015 Final Four and seeing Ryan stand up with Mayor Ballard and all these folks who are trying to figure out how do we, really let people know that Indy welcomes all.
Yeah.
And I had so much respect for everyone, either side, just coming together and really making things work. And so he's just been a great mentor for me through Sports Corp. And he hasn't been at Sports Corp for a few years now and still just gives great advice and always makes me laugh. And Mel Raines and Julie Rolash, just incredible women. Julie was our board chair for a while for the past 3 years, and Karen Surratt, another one, is our board chair now. But they have been phenomenal in just showing, how you can do all of these things. And whenever I'm scared of something or something, I kind of have imposter syndrome about something, I always go back to the fact that Mel did a renovation.
Yeah.
And I've asked her about it, and, she hadn't done that before. No. And she was trusted with one of the biggest and best renovations of an NBA, field house. It's just wild. So I always think about that because she's just incredible in how she managed that. And she's always open to giving advice on how she managed that. So And Dave Lewis, you and I have talked about Dave Lewis. So he's been phenomenal and just so passionate about the community and where we're going.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, 2 more questions. What's your best piece of advice for someone out there listening in their 20s, early 30s?
Ooh, I mean, like, Dave, do we need a separate podcast for that one? Jeez.
You've dropped a lot of gems already in this podcast.
And I was thinking about how we met too, and I was thinking about just, be curious, be humble, and don't be a jerk. Like, I think you can, and I've learned this as a woman. I feel like you can stand up for yourself. You can hold your ground. You can stand in your values. And you don't have to be a jerk about it, because so many of us cross paths so many times after we meet. I mean, I have interns who worked for me at Nuvo who are now CEOs.
Yeah.
And it's
be nice to the interns.
Exactly. But it's just interesting to see, just treat people with respect and dignity. And because you never know when you're going to cross paths with them. And then I always tell younger people, like, be curious. Figure out how to solve problems. Yeah. I mean, anytime a young person comes to me and says, how can I help? I want to get involved. I mean, it is just so reassuring that we've got some really great people who are coming up. And I think that's always a great mindset to have.
That's strong. Yeah. All right, last question. How do you, Sarah, define success? I ask every guest this question. Close out the show.
I think success is being confident in who you are and raising up others in the process.
I love it. Brevity, concise. That's a great way to end. Well, we've gone long today, but I didn't want to stop because this was really rich and you are truly an asset. I'm glad we kept you and not Cleveland, and I hope you continue to stay here. You're already a leader. I don't really like the emerging leader tag. You're a leader in this community, and excited to watch your path from here. And let me or the 500 Festival know how we can help. All right.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Sarah.
it.
Off the Record with Indiana's 250 most influential business and community leaders is a podcast that peels back the curtain on Indiana's most respected leaders, one episode at a time. Go beyond the headlines and hear the stories of grit and innovation that shape these leaders. Do you want to know who's driving our state forward? This is a must listen. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcast.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.